Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. Today will be the continuation of Burn Your Wings. This will be Chapter 9, entitled Burning Bridges. The next and final event of the sports festival is a one-on-one combat tournament. Ojiro and a student from Class B, who were on Shinso's team, decide to sit out on the basis that they have no memory and thus no right to compete. After a bit of shuffling, Tetsu and Shiozaki from Class B take their places, and then it's time for recreation before the actual tournament. Izuku feels several pairs of eyes on him, like Todoroki, whose gaze is now decidedly far less hostile and seems to want to talk to Izuku again. But Izuku can't talk to him. Not now. Not when he's desperately trying to hold together, so he purposefully averts his gaze. And Bakugo, why? And some of his friends, like Uraraka and Ida, who are shooting him worried looks, but he ignores them. Instead, Izuku spends his time with Ojiro in a private room, listening to his experience with Shinso Hitoshi from the general education course, who is his first opponent after all. It's a welcome distraction. It also feels like running away, something that Izuku has never done before. Izuku had never run from the actual Hisashi, but the very idea of him, everything he represents, and seeing him in someone that he looked up to is enough to make Izuku hightail and run. And the fact alone makes him sick on so many levels. It's with slightly unsteady feet that Izuku walks down to the stadium for the first match, and so when he hears the familiar voice of his hero right before the exit to the stadium, he almost winces. "My boy," All Might calls out, and now more than ever it reminds Izuku of Hisashi's bark of boy. But this isn't Hisashi. This isn't Endeavor. It's All Might. The grin on All Might's gaunt face, and whatever he'd been about to say, dies as he faces Izuku. He takes one look at Izuku's face, and Izuku has no idea what he sees there, but the next moment the man is crushing Izuku against his thin frame. Izuku gasps against All Might's chest. His eyes are dry, his hands are shaking, and he's still not used to physical contact like this. Inko had often been too afraid that she might worsen his injuries to touch him, but he still reaches out and grabs fistfuls of All Might's shirt with trembling hands. All Might, he manages. The man squeezes him in return, blessedly not asking any questions, but silently offering comfort and support. And that's what breaks Izuku through the fog in his mind. "What does it mean to be a hero?" he whispers. It slips out before Izuku can even stop himself. He feels ridiculous, like a child whining at his parent for one last bedtime story, or to check under the bed for monsters or something. Which Izuku had never actually done, because he already knew that where the monster was, and he shouldn't even dare think of All Might as his father, but before he can extract himself from the embrace he clearly doesn't deserve and apologize, All Might gives him another squeeze and keeps him in place. "I've said it before, my boy." "My boy," Izuku notes. A true hero is someone who saves not only lives, but what's here, too. He splays a large hand on Izuku's upper back, right behind his heart, unknowingly covering his scars. The warmth of All Might's hand somehow seeps through and penetrates the burning phantom pain. "And remember, you already have saved me." Present Might calls for Izuku's entrance. All Might ducks his head from atop of Izuku's head and whispers in his ear. "And I said this before, too, but remember it as well. Whatever happens out there, I'm so proud of you." He finally gives Izuku one last squeeze before letting go, and gently is pushing him towards the exit. Izuku stumbles forward with the momentum, then keeps walking until he's out of the tunnel and in the open arena. "Welcome to the first match of the tournament. Let's see the lineup, shall we? First off, some people we saw on the news last year as this guy who tried to save his friend from a villain. Some people know him as the first student in the years to enter UA Heroic Department with a triple-digit score. But all we know is that he's part of Class 1A, who faced off villains and came out victorious. And we all know that he came out top dog in not only the first, but also the second event of the sports festival. Will his winning streak last for the entire final event? Everyone give a round of applause for Midoriya Izuku." Izuku winces as the stadium explodes. He's used to having negative attention on him. Hell, he's good at purposely bringing negative attention to himself and getting away from everyone else. But he's never had this much positive attention. Coupled with All Might's, dare he say, affectionate encouragement, this is overwhelming to say the least. Especially with the memory of Hisashi still swirling around like murky water in his head. And facing against him is the only kid from general education. But other than that, sorry, nothing eye-catching or noteworthy at the moment. Shinso Hitoshi. The difference in their introductions is stark to the point of actually being brutal. The finer details of the tournament are explained. One side must be pushed out of bounds of the ring, be rendered unable to move, or say something conceding defeat. Present Mike hasn't even given the signal to start before Shinso is already making his move. I give. Huh. You get it, don't you, Midoriya? This is a battle to test the strength of your heart. If you have a strong vision for the future, you can't afford to save face on how you go about it. That dumb monkey talked about pride and whatnot, but... Ready? Don't you think he's an idiot for throwing his chance away like garbage? Start! The signal is given, but a resounding silence rings out the arena for a moment. Izuku stares at Shinso, who's staring, almost glaring, back at him. Ojiro had warned Izuku about Shinso's quirk, speculating that answering the boy's question puts anyone under his control. It looks like Shinso had figured Izuku would already be warned, and is willing to do or say anything he can to get under Izuku's skin and make him talk regardless. And while those words anger Izuku, he's already had years of experiences silently taking all verbal and physical abuse thrown at him. He'd never been able to stand someone else being hurt, but it's only himself who can hear Shinso's malicious words at the moment. So he narrows his eyes and silently takes a step forward. The other boy seems to get a little urgent as Izuku wordlessly steps forward. His easy stance tenses a bit, and his words start to quicken. But what about you? That was quite the intro from Present Mike. First place in the entrance exam, the obstacle course, and the human cavalry battle. You must have been blessed with some amazing quirk. And Izuku stops dead. Shinso continues, looking almost gleeful at the fact that his words have found purchase on Izuku. What is it? Telekinesis? I'm sure you must feel great to have a power like that. No wonder you're first in everything. But in my case, there was no gateway to success, not with a quirk like this. Every time someone hears about it, they say it's a villain's quirk. Do you know how that feels? Of course you don't. Someone born with a perfect quirk like you will never understand. By this point, it looks like Shinso himself has lost some control. In trying to rile Izuku up, he himself has been riled up. And with thoughts of Todoroki's revelations, Shinso's words of a villain's quirk, Inko's screams, Hizashi's laughter, and the memory of the burn swirling inside his head, Izuku can't. He can't. He breaks. Izuku laughs out loud, burying his face in his hands. His burned left palm stings at the pressure, but he doesn't care. He's ceased caring about physical pain a long time ago. He laughs like choking on broken glass, and finally lifts his head to meet Shinso's eyes. He bares his teeth in something that's too savage to be a grin, but too broken to be a snarl. My quirk made my mother scream. And then his mind goes blissfully blank. Shinso gulps as he stares at Midoriya. The boy has a blank expression on his face, just like he's seen countless times before, proof that he's under his control. But for some reason, those big green eyes that are staring right at him still manage to look accusing, hurt. Shinso swallows thickly again. He'd lost his cool, facing off a kid who he'd thought had been born with everything he hadn't. He admits it was only partly a desperate attempt to get Midoriya to talk, and partly genuine frustration and envy. But when Midoriya laughed and talked, for some reason he'd been intimidated. He'd felt like he'd overstepped and done something terrible. Shinso grits his teeth. It's just like he's told Midoriya he can't afford to save face or hesitate, not with a quirk like his own. So he makes an effort to banish the creeping feeling in his gut that feels uncomfortably like guilt, and harshly barks an order to Midoriya. Turn around and walk out of bounds. Midoriya, still blank-faced, starts to do as he's told. He turns around and takes a step forward, step after step towards the edge of the arena. For some reason, Shinso relaxes as he confirms that his mind control is working as it should. But just one step from the edge, Midoriya stops. He plants both feet on the ground with his back to Shinso. He seems to stare at the entrance of the tunnel leading out to the stadium. Then slowly his head turns to the side to look up at the relay base where Present Mike should be. And ever so slowly his head turns even more to look at Shinso over his shoulder. How? He's frozen as he meets Midoriya's green gaze, and then something explodes. Ojiro had told him that he can't remember anything during the time that he was under Shinso's mind control, but for some reason, after a brief moment of blissful blankness, Izuku can't do anything but remember. He remembers his broken mother's sobs of "I'm sorry." He remembers her scream when she first saw his flames. He remembers Hisashi's cruel sneer as he raised his hand. He remembers the chilling laugh as the man had breathed the words that branded themselves on his breaking heart. Like father, like son. He remembers Todoroki covering the left side of his face, his scar, and vowing the all-too-familiar promise of, "I won't use my father's quirk." He remembers dreaming of burning wings as he falls for having dared reach for the sun. But then, he remembers the hologram of Uraraka when he was admitted to UA. "He saved me," she had said, and her words had sounded like salvation. "I won't let you down," she had said, thanking him and promising him at the same time. He remembers Ida talking about the USJ and how he depended on Izuku. "I want to be someone you can rely on," he'd confessed. He remembers 13 telling them that every quirk has the potential to harm but also to save. "Your quirks are emphatically not existing to hurt others," they had assured. He sees All Might poking his head out of the entrance of the tunnel. "I'm so proud of you," his hero had whispered in Izuku's ear as he crushed him in a hug. "Remember, you've already saved me." He slowly moves his unresponsive body to look at the relay booth where Aizawa is. "Thank you," his hero had said while patting Izuku's head. "You saved me and All Might with your fire, Midoriya. You did good. Don't forget that." He remembers, and Izuku feels like a downright idiot. He would laugh if he could, but at the moment it's all he can do to crane his neck over his shoulder to look Shinso in the eye. He also remembers the things that the boy had said, almost screamed out in rage and frustration. "No gateway to success," he had said. "You'll never understand a villain's quirk." And despite whatever Shinso thinks, Izuku does understand. More than that, he empathizes. Shinso is hurting, and Izuku, well, he's never been able to leave someone in need of help. It's that thought that gives him the final push of willpower to break free of Shinso's control. One for All courses through him, and Izuku flicks 2 fingers on his left hand. The force of its 100% shatters his fingers and lets out an explosion of wind powerful enough to knock him completely out of Shinso's control. He turns to face Shinso once more. The boy is gaping. "How? You shouldn't have been able to move at all in the first place, let alone get out of the mind control. What did you do?" As if Izuku is going to answer him again. Shinso seems to have the same thought as his face takes on a desperate look. "So you have that much power in just your fingers? Count me jealous." Izuku steps forward. "People like me are born with a villain's quirk, and people like you have the perfect hero's quirk instead." He closes the distance between them. "Even so, I can't help dreaming about being a hero, but I've never been given a chance. How is that fair?" They're only a few steps apart now. "Damn it, say something! Or am I not even worth—" Izuku grabs Shinso's collar and his arm and throws him over his head. The boy lands on his back with an oof, coughing as the wind is knocked out of him. Izuku stands near his head and peers down at him, baring his teeth. "I'd say you've talked your share. Now it's your turn to listen." Shinso glares up at Izuku and struggles to get up. "Why would I—" Izuku kicks Shinso's stomach before he can finish the question. The blow isn't strong enough to send him flying, but it's just enough to make him double over and cough. More importantly, it's enough to cut him off. For some reason, Izuku feels calm. Everything Todoroki said, everything Shinso said, doesn't feel like it's breaking him apart now. It's a strange sensation, this calm, but it's also familiar. Izuku had felt it every time he stepped between Hisashi and his mother, every time he stepped between Bakugo and a crying child, when he stepped between the slime villain and Bakugo, when he stepped between the 0-point bot and Uraraka, when he took 13's place to lead his classmates against Kurogiri, and when he faced off Shigaraki to save Aizawa. It's a kind of lull in his mind that makes everything else reorient itself. All the fear, panic, and pain has faded away and leaves only the important thing at the moment, the need to save someone. Shinso probably doesn't even want to be saved, not by Izuku at least, but damned if he's going to give up because of that. After all, Izuku has been told all his life that he can't, but that's never stopped him. He uses the window where Shinso is too busy coughing to ask a question to strike first. "Let's start with what you said in the beginning. You said something about not saving face to realize your goals. Was it?" "I'm the one asking questions." "Nope," Izuku informs him with another kick to Shinso's stomach. This time it's hard enough to make Shinso dry heave. "Listen, for once. Now I'm going back to what I was saying. I don't get what you mean by it. You want to be a hero, right? Then the means always matter, just as much as the ends." Shinso wipes the spit and bile off of his chin and struggles to his feet, and Izuku lets him. If you forego the means for the ends, that's what makes you no better than a villain, not your quirk. Shinso freezes. His mouth is open as if he was about to say something, but no sound comes out. But then he grits his teeth and glowers. How would you know? Izuku swipes Shinso's legs out from under him before he can form a question again. The boy lands on his back, and Izuku is crouching by his head in a flash, his right hand covering Shinso's mouth and pushing his head back into the ground, while he raises his left hand to his mouth, putting a broken finger to his lips. Shh, I'm not done talking yet. Shinso looks up at Izuku as if he's crazy, his eyes fixated on the most grotesque purple hue of Izuku's shattered finger, almost against his pink lips and bared teeth. Izuku lifts his hand from Shinso's mouth. Experimentally, the boy swallows, swivels his eyes around, and then tries to provoke Izuku again. What if I forfeit? Izuku slaps his hand over Shinso's mouth again. Oh, no, you don't. You don't even get to fake forfeiting on me. You wanted life to be fair, didn't you? Well, you spewed what you wanted to say. It's only fair that you listen to what I have to say, too, no? And then he laughs. Because life isn't fair, and it certainly isn't kind. And I know, Izuku breathes, because I actually inherited a villain's quirk. At that, Shinso's eyes snap up to Izuku's. His normally drooping eyes are wide with surprise, and Izuku feels like he's ripping out and baring his soul to him. Izuku has never said this to anyone. Not his friends, not Aizawa, not even All Might, but Shinso is the first and only person who needs to hear it. Izuku smiles, and even to him it feels broken. I inherited a villain's quirk, he says quietly. I hated it. It hurt me, and it made my mother scream. And believe me, I wished I was quirkless instead. But then I used that quirk to try to save someone, and they thanked me. He lets go of Shinso and stands up. The boy stays frozen for a moment before also getting to his feet, warily eyeing Izuku as if expecting him to kick him or throw him again at any moment. He doesn't even try to open his mouth at this time. He's listening. Good. Don't you get it? No matter what kind of quirk it is, no matter who it came from, it's not the quirk, but how you use it. It's not the quirk, but you, so let me ask you. Izuku looks Shinso straight in his eyes. What have you been doing? Shinso gulps. His eyes are wide as he stares back at Izuku's unforgiving green eyes that seem to be boring into his soul. He instinctively takes a step back. A whistle blows. Shinso is out of bounds. Winner, Midoriya, Midnight shouts. Shinso whirls around. What? And there you have it, folks. After delivering an absolutely savage beating, Midoriya is the first to advance to the second round, Present Mike confirms. Shinso looks down, and sure enough, he had stepped out of bounds, with his own 2 feet. It's exactly what he'd tried to get Izuku to do. He looks up at Izuku with a strange face. Izuku grins at him and points a thumb to the stands around the stadium. Heroes and civilians alike are talking about Shinso's quirk and how useful it could be. Hear that? Izuku says, bringing Shinso's attention to himself again. It's not the quirk, but how you use it. And Shinso looks like he's actually listening. He stares at Izuku like he can't even believe him, and then he starts laughing. Don't tell me, he gasps, as he clutches his side with a wince probably bruised from when Izuku kicked him, twice. You were actually trying to help me? Izuku shrugs. You look like you needed it. Oh shit, he's under Shinso's control. Shinso grins at him and lets go. I can't even... You beat me up to stop me from asking questions, and now you answer me without any hesitation. He pauses, and then more quietly this time. Do you really think that a quirk doesn't define you? And that sounds too familiar to Izuku. He's asked himself that same thing thousands of times, and after all, but he'd never been able to give an answer, at least not a definite one. But when someone else asks, he's able to grin for them. Well, I beat you up without even using any quirk, didn't I? Oh, shit. Shinso laughs again, once again releasing Izuku from his control. I guess you did. And Midoriya? He has a peculiar expression on his face, but soon he smiles. Thanks. That single word leaves Izuku breathless. As Shinso walks off the arena, Izuku swallows thickly and then turns his head to scan the crowd. There, Todoroki is watching him, just like he had been for the past few days, but unlike before, his eyes are different, reaching out in a way, longing even, maybe even wistful. Izuku said before that Shinso is the first and only person who needed to hear this, but he was wrong. There's one more person who's hurt and in need of Izuku's help as well. Todoroki needs him. And yet... Despite Izuku having absolutely thrashed Shinso around the arena, it's actually Izuku himself who's worse off between the two of them. Shinso's bruised and battered, but despite him not being able to lay a single finger on Izuku, he's only given some bandages and bruise cream, while Izuku has to suffer Recovery Girl's disapproving look while she kisses him firmly on the cheek. One for All has absolutely shattered 2 of his fingers, after all. After Recovery Girl patches him up, Izuku sits with Uraraka and Ida to watch the rest of the first round. His heart plummets when Todoroki walks into the arena. Just a moment ago, Todoroki had been looking at Izuku like he wanted to reach out to him. There'd been something, not quite friendly perhaps, but a sense of hesitant kinship and closeness in his eyes. But now, as he's facing off with Aoyama, there's nothing but icy cold fury. The change is so subtle, but so absolute, that Izuku panics. What could have happened in these last few moments to change him so thoroughly? The only thing Izuku can think it would be is if Todoroki met Endeavor and the man had spouted his poisonous nonsense, which turns out to have been the case. While everyone else watches Todoroki embed Aoyama in an iceberg that's giant with awe, Izuku watches with dread. Todoroki needs help. He needs Izuku's help, and yet Izuku is in turmoil as he watches the rest of the first stage. Ida is played by Hatsume, but still advances to the next stage. Uraraka goes against Bakugo, and she does not make it. Izuku goes to prepare for his own match and finds her in the waiting room. "Guess I lost, huh?" she smiles. "I told you I won't let you down, and I thought I could do it, but man." She keeps chattering with a bright smile, but Izuku is too familiar with the sensation of smiling through tears to be fooled by it. And while he's not comfortable with physical contact, he can still do this for her. He kneels in front of her and takes her hands in his. "Uraraka," he calls softly, gently cutting her off her jumbled rambling, and he abruptly sees her fall silent. Izuku remembers Aizawa's pat on his head, All Might's hug. He looks her in the eye. "I am so proud of you." Uraraka gasps. Her eyes shine, and soon tears swell up and spill over her cheeks. She laughs through her tears. That's so not fair, Deku," she sobs, but she squeezes his hand and she breaks down and cries. Because Uraraka is sitting in a chair and Izuku is kneeling in front of her, he can still see her face even though she has her head bowed down. She can't even cover her face because both of her hands are still tightly enveloped in Izuku's, but she doesn't seem to mind. Izuku stays there, kneeling in front of his sobbing friend and looking up into her face, holding her hands as she desperately clutches onto him, silently offering support and comfort. Eventually her sobs die down, and President Mike's voice rings over the speakers for the second stage of the tournament to begin soon. Uraraka chuckles weakly and makes to extract her hands from Izuku's grasp. "Guess that's you. You're up first, right? Better go, else you'll be late. Don't worry about me." But Izuku catches her hands before she lets go. Uraraka looks down at him again, and Izuku looks into her eyes. His voice is soft but firm. "I mean it, Uraraka. I'm so proud of you. Don't forget that." Her breath hitches again, but she gives him a watery smile that's sincere this time. "I won't, and thank you." He smiles back, then slowly rises and leaves the room. He takes a few steps down the hallway before he hears Uraraka's voice again. She's probably on the phone. Her voice is strong. Izuku leaves her behind to walk forward, and promptly meets Endeavor. "Oh," the man says, looking down on him. "Here you were." Izuku freezes. Generally speaking, most people don't have any memories from when they were almost 3 years old, but Izuku does. He remembers the first time Hisashi slapped his mother, the first time he earnestly beat her, the first time he got locked in the broom cupboard, and the first time that he stepped between his parents. He remembers it all with startling clarity. He remembers how Hisashi had looked at him without even seeing him. Endeavor has the exact same eyes. "I've watched your match. There's an astounding quirk to be able to make such wind pressure just with the flick of a finger. In terms of raw power, it's a quirk to rival All Might's," he says, pointing right into Izuku's face. Izuku stares up at the man. He notices that he's only ever to talk about quirks, but Endeavor waits for a moment, as if expecting Izuku to say something, but when he keeps just staring at him silently, the man continues. "My Shoto has a duty to surpass All Might. His match against you will be an excellent test, so do your best to not make it a disgraceful match." And then he's off with the slightest of farewells. Izuku stays rooted in the spot for a moment more. Shinso needed help, so Izuku shoved aside all the panic and pain he'd been feeling, and even talked about Hisashi being a villain. Uraraka needed help, so Izuku ignored whatever reservations he had about physical contact and reached out to her. Todoroki needs help, but if Izuku's to help Todoroki, truly help him, then he'll need to use his fire. But he can't, not because he won't break his vow for the sake of helping someone, but because his mother is watching. And he can't do that. He can't do that to her. But Todoroki needs his help. He swallows thickly, hesitates for a moment before he pulls out his phone. He scrolls with shaking fingers for the contact, the sun, and hastily types a message. What do you do when saving one person means hurting another? Thankfully, All Might responds promptly without even asking for details, though Izuku knows the man must be confused and worried by his out-of-the-blue question. Try to lessen the damage as much as possible. Other than that, follow your heart. Follow your heart, Izuku mouths those words a few times. Lessen the damage. He hesitates one last moment because he knows how much this will worry her, but in the end he makes the call. Mom, he chokes out as soon as Inko picks up the phone. Mom, I need you to trust me. Turn off the TV. Todoroki stands opposite to Midoriya on the arena. He's cooled down from his last meeting with Endeavor now, and he's feeling a little bad about going overkill on Aoyama, but he doesn't regret it. He has to win one way or another, and no matter how much he wants to talk to Midoriya, talk to him, ask him, reach out for him, he needs to win this match. Talking to Midoriya can come later, but showing up his father... His eyes involuntarily drift to the stands. Endeavor stands out, even among the crowds, blazing his flames for the world to see. Todoroki's eyes narrow. Todoroki, who are you looking at? His eyes snap back to Midoriya. The other boy is looking at him with a peculiar expression. Midoriya lets out a huff of laughter that's devoid of any humor. To think a day would come where I would empathize with Kacchan, he murmurs, more to himself than Todoroki. Todoroki has no idea what Bakugo has to do with any of this, but Midoriya doesn't elaborate, so he brushes it aside for the moment and prepares himself. Todoroki doesn't know everything about his classmates' quirks. Take Ida, for example. He'd known the class president's quirk was engines, but that Recipro Burst was a surprise, and he's not exactly sure how Midoriya's quirk even works. But he does know that he's fast. Whatever rebound his quirk has, Midoriya seems to practically fly at times. Todoroki has two chances. Catch Midoriya in his eyes as soon as the signal starts, before he gets away, or wait for an opening when he's slowed down by the backlash of his quirk. But then again, it looks like Midoriya has found a way around the ladder, so that leaves only one choice. Start. He stomps the ground with his right foot as soon as the signal is given, sending a wave of ice streaking towards Midoriya from all directions to cut off his escape. But Midoriya doesn't even try to escape. Instead, he aims his right arm in front of him and braces it with his left, and then flicks a single finger. The blast shatters all the ice, and the wind pressure even pushes Todoroki back. He might have been pushed back all the way out of the arena if he didn't hastily form a wall of ice behind him. He narrows his eyes, raises one arm to shield himself from the wind. He'd felt this power once from Midoriya during the cavalry battle, and confirmed it during his first match, but it's still unnerving to see so much power from just the flick of a finger. Then he notices Midoriya. His face is calm and unmoved, if a bit blank compared to his normally kind air. But one finger of his right hand is utterly shattered, bent and bloody and rapidly turning into a ghastly purple. But his face betrays none of the pain. A bemused breath of air escapes Todoroki. You're willing to get that injured just to... But he gets his teeth and he sends another wave of ice at him. And just like before, Midoriya smashes it apart with wind pressure from another finger. It happens a third time, and a fourth. Now all the fingers on Midoriya's right hand are broken, though you wouldn't know it from his face. Todoroki grits his teeth and dashes towards him. He jumps off a shaft of ice towards Midoriya, but Midoriya looks at him and bares his teeth, and suddenly Todoroki is being pulled towards him with more speed than can be attributed to gravity. What? Before he can regain his balance, Midoriya's kick connects with his side hard. With the combined force of the momentum and the kick, Todoroki is sent sprawling. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Todoroki registers present Mike in the crowd going wild, but he ignores it and focuses on Midoriya. He coughs as he struggles to get up, and he hears Midoriya coughing as well. When Todoroki gets his footing again, Midoriya cocks his head at him. You didn't send ice at me, but charged instead, even though I bet you're not as experienced in close combat as ranged. Does that have something to do with how you're shivering, Todoroki? Todoroki doesn't answer, but Midoriya doesn't seem to mind. When you talked to me before in the waiting room, and again at lunch, you said that your quirk doesn't rebound as much as mine. Midoriya shows Todoroki his left palm and fingers, which are more red and burnt than they'd been a moment ago. The bandages that were on his fingers have been burned as well. He bares his teeth in a grin. Not as much. Not at all. He's figured him out. Todoroki grits his teeth and pulls back, sending another wave of ice, but Midoriya smashes it again with the already broken fingers of his right hand. You won't have any trouble if you use your fire to negate the cold, am I wrong? But you're still handicapping yourself. For what? For pride? Defiance? Fear? Midoriya laughs, and it's not a nice sound. Todoroki has never heard such a broken and harsh laugh come from someone that wouldn't be considered a normally kind and soft person. Actually, no, that's not true. He's heard it when he talked to Midoriya about All Might and Endeavor. Midoriya had laughed then, too, and it had sounded like shattering glass. Everyone is giving it their all, Midoriya continues, and there's something blazing in his green eyes. Did you even see all the other matches? Everyone was giving their all, their best. Shinso tried his best, even if the way he was going about it was a little bit crooked. Uraraka gave it her all until she literally passed out. All the others held nothing back. They were doing their best. And you come here saying that you'll only use half your power. Do you know how insulting that is to them? The jab finally gets a rise out of Todoroki. What are you trying to say? Todoroki explodes, sending another futile wave of ice that's inevitably smashed. I thought you'd understand. Oh, believe me, I do, Midoriya shoots back, dodging shards of broken ice. That's why I am here. Then why? Because it's not your best. Todoroki gets cut off again by Midoriya's roar. Sure, maybe you can become the best with just half of your power, but you won't be your best. How many more people could you save if you use all your power and not cripple yourself? How many lives would be a split second of hesitation cost? Why do you even want to be a hero? Todoroki freezes at that. A half-forgotten memory of his mother clouds his mind. You want to be a hero, right? It's okay, Shoto, you... His breath hitches, and he can't remember her next words. Midoriya is looking at him with something like understanding. You don't want to use your quirk to disavow your father. I didn't want to use mine because I don't want to be like him. I get it. I do. But Todoroki... He smiles then, and it's a strange expression, like he himself doesn't quite believe what he's saying, but he desperately wants to, and wants Todoroki to believe it too. It's not the quirk, but you. It's how you use it, even if it came from him. I promise not to use his quirk, but I also promise to become the best hero, and I can't do that without doing my best. He looks straight at Todoroki. And neither can you. Todoroki is left speechless. He had suspected that they might have a similar situation, of course, when Midoriya had whispered despite himself about abusive fathers and fire quirks, and Midoriya still hasn't said anything outright, but he'd said enough for Todoroki to understand. To understand his bearing his own wounds and scars to Todoroki. For Todoroki. Why do you even care? He whispers. Midoriya grins, and this time it's not the sharp or cutting one that like a knife. You reached out to me. You needed help, and besides... His voice is softer now. That's what heroes do. And suddenly Todoroki remembers. His mother had smiled down at him, and she had told him, It's okay, Shoto. You can be a hero. Tears gather in Shoto's eyes, and he can feel something warm nestle in his chest, and something hot explode from his left side. Flames cloak the left side of his body, and Todoroki stares at Midoriya, who's smiling at him. I can't even believe you, he says incredulously. But his eyes are still teary as he looks at Midoriya, at his savior, and he chokes out his true wish. I also want to become a hero. Midoriya grins. Good, so do I. Nice to finally meet you, Shoto. And Todoroki, no, Shoto, hears the soft voice of his mother calling his name overlap Midoriya's voice. Midoriya huffs out a sigh and looks down at his hands, one a mess of burns and one a mess of broken bones and blood. You've literally been half-assing it, but I'm worse because I've only been using a quarter. And Todoroki doesn't understand what he's saying, but Midoriya keeps talking almost as if to himself. My pool is a quarter and the super strength is a half. I only ever use my pool freely and never even use the remaining quarter except at the USJ. He barks out a short laugh. We're a disgrace to the rest of our classmates, but that stops now. Midoriya bares his teeth in another grin. I'm going to go at you with my all, and you'd better do the same. Todoroki grins back at him. What do you think I'm doing? You're the one that made me use my all. Midoriya laughs delightedly at that. I did, didn't I? I guess it's time I stop being a hypocrite and push. He raised his chin. Not just a quarter, not just a half. This is my all. The arena explodes in a violent burst of flames for the second time. Unlike the shroud that's covering Shoto's left side, Midoriya's fire roars and curls around him, then finally forms a wreath at his back. A blazing halo burns at Midoriya's back, except no, not a halo, Shoto realizes. Even as he watches in awe, the ring of flames at Midoriya's back splits in the middle and unfurls, stretching to either side and branching out. Not a halo, but wings, Shoto realizes. Midoriya grins, the flames flickering behind him, throwing his normally soft and kind face into sharp relief. He looks like a vengeful angel, reigning among mortals. Shoto, he calls, face free and grinning as if he doesn't even know what an awe-striking sight he is right now. Are you ready? Shoto swallows and charges up his ice and fire. He wonders if Midoriya would let Shoto call him Izuku. Thank you, he breathes, just a moment before they collide. The stadium explodes in a burst of light. Izuku's original quirk is a hybrid of push and pull, making either component half of his quirk. Add that to One for All, and One for All becomes half of his entire power, while his original quirk becomes the other, which makes each of the push and pull a mere quarter of his overall power. He had never used all three parts, all his power, at the same time until now. In the final moment, Izuku had been pushing out his flames, pulling himself forwards and using One for All at the same time. It felt strangely cathartic. Cementos had created several walls between him and Todoroki, but they all seemed to have been shattered as Izuku can see the sky clearly. Izuku is lying on his back, and somewhere near him he can hear the ragged pants of Todoroki. You know, the other boy says quietly, when I was little, I watched a show on TV with my mother. All Might said that even if quirks are usually inherited, from the moment they're passed on, it's not the parents but your own. And of course, Izuku, being the hardcore fanboy that he is, knows exactly what show that he's talking about. Izuku turns his head and finds Todoroki also on his back and looking at Izuku. His eyes are clear. You told me that even if it's our father's quirk, what matters is how we use it, so let me tell you that even if we inherited it, it's our power, not our father's. Izuku gasps, and then he laughs, and he isn't even comfortable with physical contact, but for some reason he gropes around blindly until his hand finds Todoroki's, and he grasps it tightly in his hand. Thank you. They lie there looking at the clear blue sky. Izuku doesn't know if he's within bounds or not. He doesn't even care, because just as he's already learned more than a decade ago, defeat can taste like a victory. This concludes Chapter 9 of Burn Your Wings. I'll be back with Chapter 10 here for you guys shortly, and as always, thank you so much for listening.